Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this recorded webinar on our Community Project Grants program here at Florida Humanities. So I'm very happy that you're watching today. My name is Lindsey Morrison, and I'm the Grants Director here at Florida Humanities. And what we intend to do today is to give you all a little snapshot about who Florida Humanities is, what this grant program, Community Project Grants, covers in particular. We will go through some examples of successfully funded grants, give you an overview of the grant lifecycle, what the requirements if you are awarded, so you know what you're getting yourself into. And then we will spend the second half of the presentation diving into keys for successful applications, where we will look at narratives, budgets, and how to apply. So first, I wanted to give a little introduction to who Florida Humanities is. We are the statewide affiliate for the National Endowment for the Humanities. Every state has a Humanities Council. Maine has one, Michigan has one, Hawaii has one, and we are Florida's. So we are based in sunny St. Petersburg, and while we're based here in the Tampa Bay region, we serve the entire state, from the Panhandle to the Keys. And so the National Endowment for the Humanities grants dollars to humanities councils like Florida Humanities, and our charge is to re-grant those funds to nonprofit organizations, cultural organizations, and communities across our state. And so with that, our mission is basically to preserve, promote, and share the history, literature, culture, and personal stories that offer Floridians a better understanding of themselves, their communities, and their state. So like I said, we are granted dollars from NEH and we re-grant it out to communities. So you can think of us kind of like a community foundation, where our charge is to support the great work happening within your organization. But first, I'd like to get a little deeper into what the humanities are. It can seem like sometimes a bit of a nebulous topic, right? Because it covers so many disciplines. You can see them here: history, literature, poetry, culture, languages, gender studies, anthropology, archaeology. It is a lot. And because it covers so many disciplines, people tend to think that the humanities is this guy, right? Plato, Aristotle, folks who existed a long time ago that perhaps aren't entirely relevant to today, but that could not be farther from the truth. The humanities is at its core the process of pursuing an understanding of our shared human experience. And through the exploration of the humanities, we learn how to think creatively and critically, to reason and to ask questions. So you can think of the humanities as that proverbial light bulb that appears above your head, that aha moment that, that enables you to expand your perspectives, your understanding of yourself and your neighbors and your state, and really just grounds your projects in analysis and interpretation. And so in particular, Florida Humanities funds public humanities programming. So what is that? Public humanities programming is active learning experiences for the public that draw upon the methods and insights of the humanities, those disciplines we just went over, and foster a greater understanding among people and invite thoughtful reflection. So let's dive right into community project grants, because this is the grant program that funds public humanities programming. And for 2022, we are so thrilled to offer up to $10,000 in funding. We doubled that. Previously, we offered up to $5,000 in 2020 and 2021 and farther back. But in reaction to the growing need of public humanities programming across communities, the increased cost of things, and people moving more into the virtual sphere and having hybrid programming, we wanted to be very reactive of the needs of the nonprofit and cultural organizations across our state. So we were so thrilled to double that amount and to really get more involved in the community. Now, community project grants are very reactive to the needs of local areas, right? We fund things from oral history projects to exhibits, lecture series and podcasts, to outdoor heritage signage. But throughout all of our funded projects, they must hit on a few things, and I've listed them here. First, all community project grants that are funded must be rooted in the humanities. They must dive into one of the humanities disciplines that we went over and be considered public humanities programming. Second, all projects must involve humanities scholars, either in the presentation or the creation of the project itself. And we'll get a little more into what a humanities scholar is. Third, all projects must engage the general public. They cannot be for a limited group of people or closed to the public. And the reason for this, as well as the fourth, which is all programs must be free or not cost prohibitive, is that we really see Florida Humanities as the organization that can come in and help support the work that you're doing so that you're able to make it more accessible to people who need it the most. And so with this grant program, we also may give special consideration to a couple things. First, organizations with budgets of 1 million or less. And second, organizations requesting $5,000 or less. So what we hope to do here is to show the organizations that if you're only needing $2,000 to put on great public humanities programming, you're still going to have a competitive application against those that are requesting $10,000 for maybe larger, more expensive public humanities programming. And the important thing to note here is what we want to fund is just great programming. And that can come in the support of a $1,000 project, a $2,000 project, or a $10,000 project. So this grant program is truly accessible to those, the smallest organizations that maybe don't have a professional grant staff, on hand, that just have a few, just very passionate volunteers that are just requesting a couple $1,000s to, to host a few lecture series, or the large multi-million-dollar organizations that want to bring in a great exhibit and engage a larger swath of people. So who is eligible to apply? Community project grants are open to nonprofit organizations, local municipalities, and cultural, civic, and educational entities. For-profit organizations and individuals are not eligible for funding. So if you are an individual that has a great community project grant in mind, you will need to find a local nonprofit organization to act as the applicant, the sponsoring organization that will facilitate this grant. And all organizations who apply are required to have a DUNS number at this time. And we would do check all organizations to make sure you are in good standing with GuideStar. Now, just to have all applicants aware before you apply, you will need to register your organization if you are not already so in a system called sam.gov after you are awarded. If you are already registered and set up to go, that is great. What sam.gov is the federal government system to make sure that your organization is in good standing to receive federal funding, because the funds that go through community project grants do come from the federal government. So you do not need to have a sam.gov account for your organization at the time that you apply for a grant, but if you are awarded, just be aware that you will need to be registered before we can distribute funds. Now I get some questions about, how many proposals are awarded funding. So right now it hovers around 37%. 37% of proposals submitted are approved for funding. Now we did some data analysis over the past year, and in 2021, we found some interesting insights. So within the application, we asked the question, did you consult with Florida Humanities about your project? And that normally typically cues some applicants that they should reach out to the grantor. We recommend that if you're applying for a Florida Humanities grant or with any other granting organization, it's always a best practice to reach out and have that conversation with the grantor to make sure that you're aligned with what they can fund. So here, the data says that in 2021, of 60 applicants who self-reported that they consulted with Florida Humanities, 29 or 48% were awarded a grant. And of the 27 applicants who did not consult or were unsure if they consulted with Florida Humanities, only 3 applicants or 11% were awarded the grant. And of those 3, 2 of them were returning applicants. So the important thing to note here is that if you communicate with the grant staff, and by communicate, I mean reach out, share your abstract, have a phone call, if it's, not the week of the deadline, preferably, share your draft application and ask if we can provide comments, set up a Zoom call to just walk through, or a phone call to walk through your proposed project. that high level of conversation with the grantor lets you know of maybe some red flags, some shifting of the budget that you need to do, maybe some clarification in your narrative that you hadn't thought about before, that will increase your chances of being funded. Now let's go through some examples of public humanities programming. These are just to get the ball rolling, get the ideas flowing, maybe spark some interest in projects that you hadn't thought of engaging in before. But we fund things that fall outside of these buckets as well, so just know that. But first, I'd like to go over the types of projects that we fund. One would be just a general lecture series or forum or a podcast series. So say you want to bring in 10 different humanities scholars to have a series of 10 lecture series over the course of 6 months. We could fund their honoraria, travel per diem, publicity for this project, and the like. We could also fund, marketing and promotion, or maybe an exhibition that you wanted to have in coordination with this lecture series. Or maybe have it be entirely through Zoom or in another virtual sphere, or just do a podcast series that, you wanted to dive into certain humanities disciplines or topics. Those are things we could fund. We also regularly see outdoor heritage signage, indoor exhibition panels, or something similar with complementary public humanities programming. And I wanted to pause here and note that you see throughout a few of these examples, we have tied in here with public programming. And by that, I mean, if you're just supporting an exhibition without a deep level of engagement, that would be more seen as passive humanities programming. What we want to fund is that active public humanities programming. Maybe that's having a lecture series or an opening night announcing the exhibition, or a series of online virtual talks that dive into the content that you're going into with the exhibit to kind of raise that dialogue and discussion with the general public. So third is we love funding oral history projects or story collections, history harvests, they are sometimes called, to collect stories from the local community. We do require that qualified oral historians are involved just to ensure that best practices are maintained. And again, just like with exhibitions, we do require that there is a level of public humanities programming associated with it. So how are you going to share those stories to the public? Maybe it's having a concluding panel discussion, an opening reception, where you're bringing in the stories or the people themselves to share in conversation with a humanities scholar to contextualize and really dive into the topic. Fourth, we love funding community conversations. There are some topics that are very relevant right now that you need to bring people together to have some round tables, and contextualize the situation with a humanities scholar. Perhaps it is a professor of history or of anthropology or the like, but community conversations that dive into very real topics that we need to talk about, rooted in those humanities disciplines, are a fundable activity. And fifth, reading or film screenings and discussions. If you wanted to host a film series and then have some humanities scholars come in for a panel discussion at the end of them, we could fund that as well. So what about some things that aren't fundable? Well, first, we do see some arts and performing arts projects that come in. And if they are just strictly arts or performing arts, say, for example, a play or a performance or the creation of a mural, or the like, if that do not have a strong humanities component to it, we could not fund that. However, we do love seeing when arts and humanities are married together and you're adding that deeper level of analysis and interpretation. You're bringing in a humanities scholar, for example, a professor of gender studies or a professor of history, to add that extra layer of contextual analysis and further describing maybe what's going on within the artistic work. Next, social service projects. There sometimes is a confusion between humanitarian efforts and the humanities. So, throughout this, the key with public humanities programming is if there is analysis and interpretation rooted in the humanities. So if it's just a project that deals with homelessness or helps to alleviate hunger in a community, while it serves a community and serves a very, very important role, that would not necessarily be public humanities programming because, there's not a scholar that is involved. There's no deep analysis level of interpretation to it with a qualified humanities scholar. Third, we do not support scholarly research or creative research without public engagement. So if you wanted to create a historical manuscript or bring in a scholar to do some research on a background behind the scenes, while that may be rooted in the humanities, it would not be public humanities programming. And public humanities programming is the aspect that we would be interested and able to support. And then lastly, projects without all the details. Maybe you do have a great public humanities program in mind, for example, a lecture series, but you're not quite sure who you want to bring in to talk yet or what they're going to talk about. And for those, we would not be able to fund a project without those key details. We would need to see who the scholars are, what their actual topics are going to be about, and that they have agreed to participate. So here are some examples of successfully funded community project grants. The first comes from Polk Museum of Art, and they hosted the project Art and Social Justice, Legacy of the Freedom Riders. So Art and Social Justice was an actually art exhibition that they had at the Polk Museum of Art, and they sought funding from Florida Humanities and were successfully awarded $5,000 to have a humanities forum at the end of it, where they brought in a humanities scholar, people, subject area experts, and community experts who participated in the freedom rides of the civil rights movement. And they also showcased a film screening from a PBS film. And so Florida Humanities was able to provide funding honoraria for the scholars, for the subject area expert, publicity and promotion for that active public humanities programming component that related to their art exhibition. Next is Sephardi Voices down near Miami. So they were awarded $1,600 to support the project Legacies of the Spanish Inquisition, Florida's Converso and Sephardi Jews in Conversation. So this organization collected oral histories from a group of people, and then they asked Florida Humanities to come in and support that public engagement, how they were presenting those stories to the general public. And finally, we'll take a look at Mandel Public Library of West Palm Beach. They're awarded $2,500 to support the project Southern Foodways and the Cultures That Shape Southern Food. So this organization, this library, was awarded funding to create a series of packets, a lecture series that all related to different cultures of Southern foodways. And they also put together a community cookbook where they solicited recipes from people in their community, and then were able to publish that. So as I promised, I wanted to take a moment to address a question that we get very often, and that is, who qualifies as a humanities scholar? Now, Florida Humanities defines a humanities scholar as someone who has a high level of knowledge in a humanities discipline, perhaps has a degree in it or teaches at a college or university, or has been the leader of an organization for the past 10 to 15 years, and their background is in a humanities discipline. For example, the executive director of a local historical society, the discipline that they're drawing upon would be history, and they have 10 to 15 years of experience there. Oftentimes, humanities scholars do come from the academic and university setting, just because that's oftentimes where scholars are housed and are situated. So we do encourage you to look to your local college university for humanities scholars to help guide your programming. Now, some examples of scholars, and they can be involved in the project as either a presenter or as an advisor. For example, with an oral history project, we do require that a qualified oral historian or folklorist be involved. And that is, as I mentioned earlier, to ensure that best practices are maintained and those precious stories of community members are respected and told accurately. For historical exhibitions or any exhibitions, we need to see professors of related humanities discipline. For example, here, if it's a history exhibit, it would be a professor of history that's qualified to speak on that topic. Or if it's an exhibit that focuses on gender identity, it would be perhaps a professor of gender studies that would come in and either write or review the content that's going to go into the exhibit, or present at a panel discussion at the end or virtually. And you can see some other examples here for an art exhibition or panel, perhaps a professor of art history, film screenings, a professor of a related, humanities discipline, or someone that, is the head of a humanities related nonprofit organization or the like. And so on the note of how many humanities scholars you should involve, our policy is the more the merrier. And the reason for that is, you could have one humanities scholar that is great, but when you have 2, 3, 4, or 5, they're able to bounce ideas off each other. They all come from different levels, different backgrounds, different theories and methods that they lean on. So it really creates a more dynamic and robust and fruitful project when you have a lot of scholars involved. Now, in addition to humanities scholars, which is required, we also love seeing subject area experts and community experts. Maybe it is someone who is an expert in the field, but the field is not a humanities discipline. That would be more of a subject area expert. We love seeing those involved in projects. Community experts, maybe it's someone who has lived in the community or someone who is providing those oral histories. Having them as a presenter or having them be an advisor throughout your project is highly advised. So let's look at the 2022 deadlines for community project grants. We have 4 in 2022. The first one is in January. We have one in April, July, and October. All applicants should note that the deadlines for community project grants are at 12 p.m. noon Eastern time. So if you are looking to apply at 4 or 5 p.m., the deadline will have closed and we'll have closed out that process. So community project grants are 1-year grants. If you are awarded funding, you have to spend that funding within the 1-year contract period. Now, taking a look at the January deadline as an example, if you apply by January 19th at noon, you will find out on March 1st if you're awarded funding or denied funding. And if you are awarded, you will have 1 year to complete the project. Now, a very important date for applicants is to take note at that public programs can start date. We do have a 6-week buffer between the contract start date, that is March 1 of 2022 with the January example, and when public programs can start, which is April 12th for that one. So a public program would be perhaps a public lecture or the panel discussion or forum or festival that you're seeking funding for. We have that 6-week buffer because after you're awarded, you'll need to sign your contract, make sure your organization's registered in sam.gov in order to request 90% of your award, and then submit an event listing form to put your event on our online calendar and make sure it's registered in your folder. So these things can take a little bit of time. We also like to notify our board, our staff, maybe local members of Florida Humanities that could attend your event. So we need a 6-week, at least a 6-week time period to get your event up and notified to everybody. So taking a look at the grant life cycle, what does a whole entire community project grant look like? Well, again, at the January deadline, using that as an example, the review period is January 20th through February 28th of 2022. And during this time, we do pass all community project grant applications through an external evaluation panel. And the panel is composed of Florida Humanities staff, board members, as well as external humanities scholars that come from a diverse representation of backgrounds and humanities disciplines. And so we're really thrilled that we were able to expand our humanities scholars on our external panels over the past couple of years. So for the January 19th deadline, you find out March 1st if you're approved or denied. If you are approved, you sign a contract, ensure that your organization is registered in sam.gov, and you can request 90% of the funding up front. The final 10% is held, and it's you can ask for it within the final report, 10% as a reimbursement. Now, if you are denied, don't get discouraged. It happens. As we said, 37% are funded. So there's a large amount that are denied because there's so many people that are trying to do humanities funding out there. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to seek the evaluation comments, because our evaluators do provide really in-depth comments about perhaps how you could have strengthened your narratives, shifted around your budget, or the like. So reach out to me for community project grants and ask if you could see those comments. and then revise and apply again. We love seeing applicants who are denied in the past return and apply and are approved for grant rounds in the future. So let's take a look at what is required of funded grantees, like I said, so you can know what you're getting yourself into if you are awarded. We do have a contract agreement that is non-negotiable that must be signed by an authorized representative of your organization. Ensure your organization is registered in sam.gov. Registering is free, and it is free to seek help. I myself have used their online system, and you could get stuck, but they have webinars. You could enter their chat or give them a call, and they're happy to walk you through the process. And then we also now have project director meetings. So all who are awarded funding are invited to a required project directors meeting where you could meet each other, get to know the other projects and learn what is required of project directors throughout the life cycle of their grant, which, as you can see here, as I mentioned on the deadlines page, you must submit event listing forms for each one of your public events. Keep us in the loop if you have any changes programmatically or budgetarily, and submit a final report either 60 days after the last event or the contract end date, at which stage you'll request the final 10% of funding. Now, pausing for a moment for the logo and acknowledgement requirements, we do require, just so you are aware, that all funded projects from community project grants have Florida Humanities logo on print and digital materials, all print and digital materials that are resulting of the funding, as well as this acknowledgement language that mentions Florida Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities support of this project. Now let's look into keys of successful applications, starting off with the narratives. So with any grant application, there's going to be a place for you to narratively describe what you're going to do with your project. And these narrative questions include the history and mission of your organization. Maybe if you had support from Florida Humanities in the past, if you haven't, you can describe all of that there. The second is the humanities content. And this is perhaps one of the most important narratives of your entire application, because it is here where you're going to describe how your project is rooted in the humanities, how it qualifies as public humanities programming, and it's really just the overview snapshot of what you are going to do. And I'll show you examples of some of these narratives in just a moment. Next, you're going to look at work plan, marketing, and promotion. How are you going to market this great project out to Florida, to your community, and to the nation at large? What are some of the channels, the social media channels, the news channels that you're going to promote it through? What is their intended reach? We do like to see both qualitative and quantitative data. That is, which newspapers are you going to advertise through, and what is their reach? Next, we ask you to take a thought at what is your target audience. We want to know who this project is for, who is it really targeted at? And more importantly, how are you going to make special efforts to include underserved communities in both the creation of the programming as well as in the promotion of it? Fees, we do ask you to take a moment to describe how much you're going to charge. If it's free, that is great. If there's a cost, we do need you to describe that. And I mentioned at the beginning that we do not fund projects that we see as cost prohibitive. And cost prohibitive can be described as, maybe the cost of a movie ticket. Can a family attend for $20 or less? That is what we mean by cost prohibitive. If the fee per individual is $25, for a family of four, that would be $100 to attend the programming. And we really see our efforts to support public humanities programming as making these projects accessible to those who need it the most. Next, we're going to ask you to describe project personnel. It is here where you'll list out the humanities scholars involved in your project, how they are involved, and what they're exactly going to be talking about or advising the project on, and what particular humanities disciplines are they grounded in. And then lastly, impact and evaluation. What is the short-term and long-term impact of your project, and how are you going to measure its success? And we do require that you affix a sample evaluation of the questions that you are going to ask. And for the evaluation, take a moment to think deeply about how you can address some of the particular humanities themes that come out of your project. An example of a good question is, how did people's perspectives change from when they started out attending this project to afterwards? Like, what did they learn? Now let's dive into a successful humanities narrative. So as you can see here, this is the second narrative question that applicants are required to answer. There is a character count that includes spaces, so just be aware of that. We did expand it for 2022, but you will still have to stay within the word and character count. So as you can see here, this humanities content is well organized. They've broken it down in paragraphs. It's very easy for evaluators to see what they're going to do, what the different programs are. With the second paragraph, you could see that through January through March 2021, they're going to do this program on this topic. They have these scholars involved in it, and they're going to talk about this. And they do that for every one of their public humanities programming. And this really allows the evaluators to see, okay, yes, this project is rooted in public humanities. It is related to humanities discipline, and it's going to make a big impact. Another tip is to use this narrative, the humanities content narrative, to describe what you're actually going to use the funding for. We see some applicants fall into the trap of describing what they have done previously. For example, if you're funding a festival, they describe what they did in the festival last year and the success that it had. You could, condense that into 2 or 3 sentences, but really focus the narrative on what you're going to do within the contract period with these funds. What is this next festival going to look like? Evaluators will want to know that here. Another example is history projects. We see people who are so passionate and knowledgeable about the history of their topic that they spend about 80% of the humanities content telling about the history, which, evaluators typically, they're all humanities scholars for the most part, so they do know about the history of a topic, but if they're unsure, they oftentimes go to Google and look it up. So because there is a word count, we do highly encourage people to spend 10% or 20% on the history, but the bulk of it on what you're going to do with funds if awarded. So here's an example of a successful promotion outline. They've briefly described their work plan, but they've really taken a moment to talk about the different media streams and platforms they're going to promote their project through, the reach of them, and also identifying any promotional partners that's going to help advertise this grant and get it out to the broader community. So here are some unsuccessful narrative examples. Looking at the humanities content, we see that this individual didn't use the full word count, unfortunately, and they just described it rather broadly. So evaluators weren't able to truly understand what they're going to do with funds. And then for target audience, it's a smaller, narrative. Again, they didn't use the full word count. We really need to see that qualitative and quantitative data. So for budgets, I wanted to take a moment now that we've looked at the narrative to go over the budget. Now the budget form, if you pull up the application, and we'll see a screenshot of it in just a moment, but the first part is a table where you're going to put in the numbers of what you're requesting funding for and what you are recording as cost share. And then the second part of that budget form is a detailed narrative where you are going to describe line item by line item what those requested funds will be used on. So we have here the different line items. They are honoraria, travel, per diem, and lodging, facilities, equipment, and AV, publicity and promotion, supplies, exhibit design, and other. So we do support a lot of honoraria for humanities scholars, bringing in big name speakers or providing a small honoraria for local professors or college administrators to talk on their humanities topic. We could support the travel, per diem, and lodging if you're bringing in people from out of state or they're traveling from another part of Florida. That's something that you could use these funds to cover. Facilities, equipment, and AV. If you have to, if the place that you're hosting your exhibit in has a facility fee, or if you want to live stream it and there's a hefty live stream charge, you could request funding for that. Publicity and promotion, we're talking about newspaper ads, Facebook, ads, promotion within there. If you wanted to do targeted ads, if you wanted to create marketing materials, print marketing flyers or rack cards, Those are some of the things as well. And then exhibit design and fabrication, because we do fund a lot of exhibits, we have a separate line item for that there. And other, maybe there's another cost that we don't have a line item for, you'll just have to narratively describe that. And do be aware there are costs that we cannot support. One would be food and beverage or alcohol. Those costs would have to be recorded as cost share. And there are a few other ones as well, which we go into in the guidelines. So please pull up the guidelines and take a look at what is allowable for budgets for requested funds and what is unallowable. Now, like I said, here is a screenshot of the budget form successfully filled out. You can see this applicant requested exact funds needed for the projects. They're all allowable costs. And they also recorded all cost share. Now, you will note, we'll go over cost share next, but there is a one-to-one cost share requirement. That is, if you are requesting $10,000, like you see here, you have to show at least $10,000 in total cost share made up of either cash or in kind. And while there is at least a one-to-one match, we do love to see projects that record all eligible cost share. So think about all the total expenses of your project and make sure to record it there. So if you're unsure what cost share is, let's just take a brief moment to define it for you. So cost share or match are those costs of a project that are not paid by Florida Humanities through a grant, so not outside of the requested funds, but paid instead using resources within the organization or from outside organizations through other grants or sponsorships. And cost share can come in the form of in-kind or cash, either one or the other, or a combination of the both. Meaning that if you are requesting $5,000 from Florida Humanities, you have to show $5,000 in cost share, which can be entirely in kind or entirely cash, or a combination. So let's take a look at an example of cost share in practice, really simplified down to try to explain it. So say, for example, your project is a lemonade stand and you have been awarded $200 from Florida Humanities to buy lemons for your lemonade stand, which is a lot of lemons. So what cost share is all those other costs that contribute to the lemonade stand outside of those lemons. So you see here, the in-kind costs would be a $50 table donated by a neighbor because you need a table to put things on, donated time, volunteer time spent at the table from a neighbor friend. Now the going rate right now, as we're recording this in December of 2021, is $28.54 per hour for volunteer hours. That's the national standard right now. So if someone is volunteering, you could use that number. They're volunteering for 10 hours and you can record then $285.40 in-kind cost share, which is great. So another example, cost share cash. Say you need a lemonade juicer and mom has really been nice and decided to go buy you, granted you a sponsorship of the juicer and pitcher, and that would be $100 because it's a really nice one. And she's also printing at home. So your organization, your home is printing $20 and flyers to distribute to promote your lemonade stand. So as you can see here, this applicant for the lemonade stand recorded all in kind and cash. It was beyond the $200, so they went beyond the one-to-one match. And the total project budget, including the lemons and everything in between, was $655.40. So here's an example of budget detail. So we went over the table that's on the top of the budget form, and we also ask you to describe line item by line item what those numbers that you put in the table actually go to. So for example, within honoraria, if you are this person here, they were requesting $3,000 in honoraria, we will need to see how much you are paying to each person and who those individuals are. And this person actually provided another page where they listed out each of the scholars, but we would typically like to see that within the budget detail. And you can see here too that travel per diem and lodging, they requested $1,295, and they said who was receiving each of the costs, so how those funds are broken down. And the reason for that is, grantors really need to see where our funds are going. We do not award blanket costs, for example, just $5,000 for honoraria, but we're not sure who it goes to. we would be unable to award funds in that way. So do be as descriptive as possible. You don't have to color code it. It's really great to see when things are outlined and underlined and bolded and color coded, but you don't need to do that here. But we do need to see where all the costs are going. So an example of an unsuccessful budget, you can see here this applicant didn't maybe quite provide any detail. They didn't, describe narratively, where the facilities, equipment, and audiovisual going, or the publicity and promotion, or what that other is. So we really didn't get a sense of where the requested funds from Florida Humanities would be going to. There also seemed to be an issue with adding the total cost share. And they didn't match up what they put in the table with what is in the budget detail. And some other pitfalls is perhaps requesting funds for unallowable costs, or entirely for overhead or things like that. What Florida Humanities is really for is to come in and support that great public humanities programming, to really expand it beyond what you would be able to normally do, to make sure underserved communities are served and are reached through this programming, and to put on some really transformational projects. So now that you are ready to apply for funding, what are your next steps? First, you're going to brainstorm your project, determine what goals you want to accomplish, and how your project is rooted in the humanities. You can go back through and watch this presentation again, read the guidelines, read online. And then what we encourage you to do is to contact Florida Humanities. We love working with grantees, and we're here to help you. We hope that we come across as accessible and are timely in our responses to you, and really help you formulate a great application. Because we really want to relate to you that grants shouldn't be a scary thing that that is inaccessible for people who maybe are not professional grant writers, they've never written a grant before, or they have a staff of 2, or just of all volunteers. We really hope to make this grant funding accessible to all. So that is all to say. Please do reach out, share your abstracts with us, have a phone call, or ask to set up a Zoom call if there's an appropriate time to do so before the deadline. And I'm also happy to pre-review applications if sent to me for community project grants at least a week before. A week and a half would be preferable before the deadline. So next, you're going to apply for funding. And don't forget, to ask questions along the way if you're unsure what a humanities, what the narrative is getting at within the application, or what a certain line item in the budget is for. See us as an open form of communication. We're happy to answer those questions. And if you are denied, seek those comments. The evaluators put really a lot of thought into each application that they are reviewing, and have recorded all of their comments in the online system, which you have to ask for. So reach out to me, say, hey, can I see the evaluator comments? And I will download them and then send them to you. So we do have the online application portal. All applications must be submitted through this portal. We can't accept any paper applications, but it's really easy to set up an account, or to log into your existing account if your organization has already applied for a grant. And you do not need to create an organizational account if you've applied for another one of Florida Humanities programs in the past. If you're unsure if your organization has an account, reach out to either Lisa Lennox, who is mentioned down here, or myself, and we can let you know. And if your organization already has an account, what we'll do is we will add you as a contact. But if you are brand new, you'll go ahead and just set up the system for the first time, put in your DUNS number, your federal entity number, address, all that relevant information. And then you will get over to here, where you'll make sure you are in the apply page. You'll see the open grant and programs that we have at that time, the open funding opportunities, and then you will go up here and hit apply. I also wanted to draw your attention to down here. This is the preview button. So if you are not quite sure if you want to apply for this grant, you wanted to take a look at the questions, you can click preview and see all the narrative questions, all the budget forms, things that you have to attach, everything like that, and ask us questions. So finally, I want to thank you all very much for watching this recorded webinar. My name is Lindsey Morrison, the grants director here at Florida Humanities, charged with managing our community project grants program. And I look forward to talking to each of you if you're interested in submitting a grant proposal. So thank you all.